The iconic classic that became a symbol of American culture was created not without its share of challenges. The script was rejected dozens of times, the team had to cut costs on special effects, and, to top it off, actors were replaced mid-production. Movies Inside Out presents Back to the Future is a sci-fi film directed by Robert Zemeckis, released in 1985. Why did studio after studio refuse to produce it? What role was a chimpanzee supposed to play? How does a refrigerator fit into the story? And how did the pride of a studio executive help preserve the movie's beloved title? The creation story. The making of the iconic film Back to the Future began in the basement of screenwriter Bob Gale's parents' house. Gale stumbled upon his father's high school yearbook, where his dad was the class president, and recalled that he himself had never been friends with his own class president. This led Bob to wonder whether he would have gotten along with his father if they had been the same age. The only way to answer that question was with a time machine, so Gale decided to write a screenplay about time travel. He shared the idea with his collaborator, Robert Zemeckis, who was inspired by his mother's contradictory stories about her youth, and added this amusing element to the future film. The duo began drafting the screenplay in late 1980. Unlike many similar films, they wanted to show that changing the past could alter the future. Thus, the first draft featured Marty accidentally disrupting his parents' first meeting after traveling to the past. Seeking funding, Robert Zemeckis approached Walt Disney Studios. However, they rejected the script outright.
You gotta listen to me!
I got enough practical jokes for one evening. Good night, future boy!
No, wait, Doc!
Believing the storyline about a mother's romantic interest in her own son, even through the lens of time travel, was too risky. On the other hand, other major studios felt the concept wasn't risky enough. At the time, risque teen comedies like Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Revenge of the Nerds were all the rage, and Gale and Zemeckis' script seemed too tame in comparison. Compounding the issue was Zemeckis' track record of box office flops. Things changed in 1984 when Zemeckis' adventure film, Romancing the Stone, became an unexpected hit. Studios began reconsidering his proposals. Gale and Zemeckis also had the support of Steven Spielberg, who had collaborated with them on previous projects. Finally, after 44 rejections from studio executives, Universal Pictures agreed to produce the time travel story, but capped the budget at $14 million. To stay within budget, Zemeckis and Gale had to abandon some ideas, such as using special effects to depict the time transitions. Instead, they opted for animated sequences, which became a signature feature of the film. The script underwent many changes during development. For example, in the initial drafts, Doc Brown was referred to as Professor, and Marty traveled to the past using the energy from a nuclear test explosion in the Nevada desert. However, the producers deemed this scene too costly, leading to the idea of using a lightning strike instead. Initially, the time machine wasn't a car, but a refrigerator. This idea was scrapped over concerns that children might lock themselves in refrigerators at home while trying to test their time travel capabilities. The appliance was replaced with a vehicle, a machine that 1955 residents might mistake for an alien spaceship. Thus, the DeLorean was chosen for its distinctive gull-wing doors. The production design team converted 3 real DeLorean cars into time machines, using various salvaged parts. For example, they needed something resembling a turbine for the plutonium chamber, and ended up repurposing a Dodge wheel cap. In an earlier draft, Marty didn't invent rock and roll. Instead, his school dance performance caused riots that had to be broken up by the police. Combined with Marty accidentally revealing to Doc the secret ingredient that powered the time machine, regular Coca-Cola, this disrupted the future. When Marty returned to the 1980s, he found a world reminiscent of the 1939 World's Fair, featuring towering futuristic buildings, flying cars, and revolutionary inventions powered by Coca-Cola. Rock and roll didn't exist in this timeline, and Mambo was the dominant trend. Marty decided to kickstart a delayed cultural revolution. The film's ending also underwent significant revisions. Originally, Marty's father, George, discovered an old newspaper article about the school riot in the 1950s and recognized his son in the photo. However, this ending didn't resonate with test audiences and was changed. The Darth Vader scene was also added later.
Silence, Earthling! My name is Darth Vader.
Initially, Marty was supposed to appear to George in a generic alien costume. Many ideas were dropped due to production costs, others were replaced with more effective alternatives, and some changes were made personally by Universal Pictures president Sid Sheinberg. For instance, he changed Professor Brown to Doc Brown and suggested making Doc's pet a dog named Einstein instead of the originally planned chimpanzee, Shemp. Sheinberg also proposed renaming Marty's mother. Initially named Meg, then Eileen. He insisted on Lorraine, after his wife. Speaking of names, Doc Brown was given the first name Emmett as a nod to the film's theme. When the word time is spoken backward syllable by syllable, it sounds like Emmett, almost like Emmett. Furthermore, Doc's middle name, Lathrop, is portal spelled backward. However, throughout the trilogy, only the letter L is mentioned, with the full name revealed later by Bob Gale. Marty McFly was named after Marty Casella, an assistant producer on one of Zemeckis and Gale's early projects, Used Cars. Zemeckis suggested the surname McFly because it sounded distinctly American and region neutral. Interestingly, Universal's Sid Sheinberg disliked the title Back to the Future. He was against using the word future and pushed for the title Spaceman from Pluto, tying it to jokes Marty makes in the film. Horrified, Zemeckis and Gale turned to Steven Spielberg, who sent Sheinberg a memo thanking him for his excellent joke. Too proud to admit his suggestion was serious, Sheinberg dropped the matter, allowing the movie to keep its now iconic title. Casting.
I'm from the future. I came here in a time machine that you invented.
Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis envisioned only Michael J. Fox in the role of Marty McFly. However, Fox was tied up with the hit TV show Family Ties, which had made him a star. The script for Back to the Future didn't even reach him initially, because his managers were certain he wouldn't have the time to take on the role. Gale and Zemeckis were prepared to wait for their ideal candidate, but the studio insisted on starting production promptly. As a result, Zemeckis and Gale began considering other young stars, such as John Cusack, Johnny Depp, Ben Stiller, Robert Downey Jr., and Charlie Sheen. Among all the contenders, C. Thomas Howell was the favorite. However, Universal Pictures president Sid Sheinberg preferred Eric Stoltz, impressed by his performance in the 1985 drama Mask. Though Stoltz was an excellent actor, Zemeckis doubted his ability to bring the comedic energy required for Marty. To address this concern, Zemeckis secured Sheinberg's promise that if Stoltz failed to embody Marty effectively, the team would be allowed to reshoot the film.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Emmett Brown. I'm standing on the parking lot at Twin Pines Mall. It's Saturday morning, October 26, 1985, 1:18 a.m.
For the role of Doc Brown, the studio's first choice was John Lithgow, but scheduling conflicts forced him to decline. Producer Neil Canton then suggested Christopher Lloyd, whom he had worked with on another adventure film. Initially, Lloyd turned down the role, so the search continued. Other names considered included Jeff Goldblum, Steve Martin, Eddie Murphy, Danny DeVito, Robin Williams, and others. Eventually, Christopher Lloyd changed his mind after his wife persuaded him to at least read the script. Inspired by the script, Lloyd shaped Doc's character by drawing on Albert Einstein's scientific persona and conductor Leopold Stokowski's eccentric mannerisms.
Kids, we're gonna have to eat this cake by ourselves. Your Uncle Joey didn't make parole again.
Casting Marty's parents was comparatively straightforward. Leah Thompson and Crispin Glover immediately fit their roles and signed on without hesitation.
Since you're new here, I'm gonna cut you a break. Today.
For the school bully, Biff Tannen, actors J.J. Cohen and Billy Zane were both considered but ultimately cast as Biff's lackeys instead. Cohen was passed over as Biff because he wasn't tall enough compared to Eric Stoltz. Bob Gale even admitted that if Michael J. Fox had been cast from the beginning, Cohen likely would have landed the role of the gang leader. Instead, the part went to comedian Thomas F. Wilson. In real life, Wilson is a kind and likable person, the complete opposite of his on-screen persona. Drawing from his childhood experiences with bullying, Wilson created the iconic character of Biff. Incidentally, Biff's surname came from Universal Studios executive Ned Tannen, whom Gale and Zemeckis had little affection for.
She's just trying to keep you respectable.
Well, she's not doing a very good job.
Terrible.
Save the clock tower!
The role of Marty's girlfriend, Jennifer, initially went to Melora Hardin after actresses Kira Sedgwick and Jill Schoelen were deemed unsuitable. Schoelen was even told she looked too exotic and not American enough. Claudia Wells had also been considered but turned the role down initially due to a commitment to an ABC series.
That was so stupid. Grandpa hit him with the car.
It was meant to be.
Marty's sister Linda was played by Wendy Jo Sperber. Interestingly, Sperber was 3 years older than her on-screen mother, Leah Thompson, and 6 years older than Crispin Glover, her on-screen father.
Why even bother, McFly? You don't have a chance. You're too much like your old man. No McFly ever amounted to anything in the history of Hill Valley.
The no-nonsense school principal was portrayed by James Tolkien, already a veteran of minor roles in action and horror films. He was the first and only choice for the role. All of Marty McFly's songs were performed by musician Mark Campbell, credited in the film as Marty McFly. Campbell was best known as the lead singer of the 1980s band Jack Mack and the Heart Attack. The filming process. Filming began on November 26, 1984, with the studio requiring the movie to hit theaters by July 1985. One of the first scenes shot was where Doc Brown doubts that movie star Ronald Reagan is president in 1985.
Who's president of the United States in 1985?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan, the actor?
Since 1984 was an election year, this joke would have been removed if Reagan hadn't been re-elected. To save time, editing was done concurrently with filming, which revealed a significant issue. Eric Stoltz wasn't working out as Marty McFly. The filmmakers wanted quirky energy, but Stoltz played the role with a somber intensity. His portrayal of Marty dwelled on the fear of being trapped in the past or disappearing due to his parents not falling in love. His serious tone affected the entire crew, and he even clashed with co-star Thomas Francis Wilson after nearly breaking Wilson's collarbone during the diner fight scene. Stoltz insisted on hitting Wilson for real in every take, despite repeated requests to tone it down. Later, Wilson admitted he had planned to retaliate in another scene, but the opportunity never arose. In early January 1985, Stoltz was informed he was being replaced. He acknowledged he wasn't suited to the comedic tone, but questioned why he had been cast in the first place. Zemeckis took responsibility, admitting he should have trusted his instincts instead of bowing to Sid Sheinberg's preference. When Thomas Wilson was called in to meet with Zemeckis and Gale, he assumed he was being fired and burst into tears. Instead, they extended his contract to reshoot several scenes, much to his relief.
Hey, you, get your damn hands off. Oh.
Meanwhile, Leah Thompson had to be tracked down on her day off. She had gone to Europe to visit her boyfriend, Dennis Quaid, who was filming another movie. That same January, Zemeckis and producer Steven Spielberg reached out to Michael J. Fox again. Fox was still working on the TV show Family Ties, but he loved the Back to the Future concept so much that he agreed to join the cast without even reading the script. However, Family Ties executives demanded the show remain Fox's priority. This led to a grueling schedule. Fox would film Family Ties during the day and shoot Back to the Future at night. Often, his driver had to carry the exhausted actor to bed upon arriving home. Fox's salary was $250,000, and his scenes were shot separately and later added in editing. For example, in the McFly family dinner scene, Marty's close-ups and the other characters' parts were filmed at different times. The reshoots added $4 million to the budget, but everyone agreed it was worth it. Fox brought an upbeat atmosphere to the set, energizing the production, even though he struggled with sleep deprivation.
You have no concept of time?
Hey, come on! I had to change. You think I'm going back in that suit?
Occasionally, he forgot which project he was working on, but improvised his way through forgotten lines seamlessly. Contrary to popular belief, Fox didn't need to learn skateboarding for the film. He was already an experienced skater, though a stunt double handled more complex moves. In many ways, Fox was just like Marty McFly in real life, a music-loving skateboarding teen who dreamed of being a rock star. Replacing Stoltz with Fox improved the film, but led to another casting change. Actress Melora Hardin, cast as Marty's girlfriend Jennifer, was taller than Fox. The predominantly female crew voted overwhelmingly that Marty shouldn't be shorter than his girlfriend. Hardin was let go before shooting began, and Claudia Wells, whose ABC series had just been canceled, was hired instead. Many other candidates were rejected solely because of their height relative to Fox. Fox's height also influenced Christopher Lloyd's performance. To minimize their height difference, Lloyd hunched over while portraying Doc Brown. Interestingly, Fox was nearly 3 years older than Crispin Glover, who played his father, George McFly, and only 10 days younger than Leah Thompson, who played his mother, Lorraine. Thompson spent about 3 hours in the makeup chair to transform from a 23-year-old into a 47-year-old. Glover's anxiety on set enhanced his portrayal of George McFly, a character intended to be nervous and awkward.
Last night, Darth Vader came down from planet Vulcan and told me that if I didn't take Lorraine out, that he'd melt my brain. Yeah.
However, his tension occasionally caused him to lose his voice, requiring him to dub some lines in post-production. Zemeckis often clashed with Glover, finding his acting choices overly exaggerated. They frequently argued about small details, such as how George should open a door. Thompson recalled that before filming the happy ending where George and Lorraine are a successful couple, Glover invited her to his apartment to paint a volcano on the wall together. Although strange at first, the activity helped them bond and better understand their characters. Production delays were most often caused by mechanical issues with the DeLorean. The car's door mechanism broke frequently, and Fox often hit his head on the door while improvising during takes. Ironically, the film glamorized one of the most unreliable cars of all time.
What, a DeLorean?
The way I see it, if you're gonna build a time machine into a car, why not do it with some style?
To create the frosty look of the time-traveling DeLorean, the crew used liquid nitrogen to literally freeze the car. Meanwhile, the fiery tire tracks were created manually by pouring and igniting fuel. Although digital effects were considered for the time travel sequence, the filmmakers decided against them due to high costs and production challenges. Surprisingly, Back to the Future only used visual effects 32 times, despite its time travel theme. Many filming locations were familiar from other Universal Studios projects. The clock tower seen in Back to the Future also appeared in the 1962 film To Kill a Mockingbird. The tower's chimes even match those in the 1960 adaptation of Herbert George Wells' The Time Machine. This was likely intentional, as Zemeckis included several nods to that film. For instance, Back to the Future opens similarly, and the time circuits in the DeLorean use the same green and yellow lights featured in The Time Machine. Another Easter egg is the date of Marty's trip to the past, November 5th, which also appears in the sci-fi film Time Rider, The Adventure of Lyle Swan. Additionally, Doc Brown dangling from the clock hands mirrors the iconic clock tower stunt in the 1923 silent film Safety Last. Besides Universal Studios sound stages, the production used other real-world locations. The parking lot scenes were shot at a mall in City of Industry, California, and Hill Valley High School scenes were filmed at a school in Whittier, California, where Richard Nixon once studied. The Enchantment Under the Sea dance was shot in the Hollywood United Methodist Church, while the Baines home was located on Bushnell Avenue in South Pasadena. The Burger King near Doc's lab was a real restaurant, and the brand was mentioned in the film in exchange for allowing the crew to shoot there and park nearby for free. Movie's mistakes and errors. Despite its legendary status, Back to the Future isn't without its share of blunders. Considering the film was completed and released in less than 10 weeks, this isn't surprising. The post-production team practically lived at the studio to meet the tight deadline. The rush left a few noticeable errors behind. The ghost of the fired actor. Some scenes still feature Eric Stoltz, the original Marty McFly. It's likely Stoltz diving into the DeLorean to escape the Libyans. He might even be the one punching Biff in the face, judging by Tom Wilson's line of sight. Looks like the editors lost track of where Eric ends and Michael J. Fox begins. The magical candy jar. In the opening scene, when Marty sees his father arguing with Biff, a glass jar full of candy appears on the table. Moments later, the jar is mysteriously half empty. Or half full, if you're an optimist. Looks like someone snuck a snack between takes. The time-traveling flyer. The Save the Clock Tower. Flyer changes its appearance throughout the movie. When Marty shows it to Doc in 1955, it looks brand new. In other scenes, it's crumpled, then smooth again, as if time itself is messing with it. The mysterious video recording. The footage Marty shows Doc from the mall differs from what was actually filmed. For example, the recording cuts off earlier than when Marty stopped the camera. Looks like the camera captured its own version of events. The shape-shifting DeLorean. Since 3 DeLoreans were used during production, inconsistencies abound. Seatbelts appear and disappear, and after collisions, the car shows no visible damage. It's no wonder. Each crash was likely a whole different car. Musician Mishaps. For a supposed seasoned musician, Marty makes some rookie mistakes.
All right, guys, listen to this blues riff and B. Watch me for the changes and try and keep up, okay?
At Doc's house, he connects the guitar to the amp incorrectly, turning the amp on before plugging in the cable. Plus, lighter objects nearby somehow aren't affected by the same sound wave that throws Marty across the room. Historical inaccuracies. Doc uses July 4th, 1776 to explain time travel, calling it the date the Declaration of Independence was signed. In reality, the document was signed on August 2nd, while July 4th marks its ratification. Oops, looks like Doc needs a refresher in American history. Reagan's romantic history. When Marty tells Doc that Ronald Reagan is president in 1985, Doc jokes,
Suppose Jane Wyman is a first lady!
Whoa, wait, Doc!
but Reagan had divorced Wyman and married Nancy Davis by then. Guess Doc didn't keep up with future presidential gossip. Why didn't Marty's parents recognize him? Fans often wonder how George and Lorraine didn't notice their son looks exactly like the guy who brought them together. According to co-writer Bob Gale, the two only knew Marty for 8 days and likely didn't have any photos of him. It's plausible, memory fades, especially when you're busy falling in love. The sibling paradox. This one's trickier to explain. After Marty alters his parents' past, he, his brother, and his sister still look identical to how they did before. For this to happen, the same children would need to be conceived at the exact same time in both timelines. A near impossible feat considering George and Lorraine's new personalities. Perhaps the filmmakers sprinkled in a little extra time travel magic for good measure.
Magic.
Back to the Future remains a legendary film, despite, or maybe because of, these amusing goofs. Which of these mistakes did you find funniest? Share your thoughts in the comments. Deleted scenes and bloopers. Many scenes shot for Back to the Future didn't make it into the final cut, but were later released in bonus editions. Some are extended versions of existing scenes, while others include entirely new material. One deleted scene at the beginning of the film shows George McFly buying a box of peanut brittle from a neighbor and his daughter. This follows a moment where Marty tells his father he needs to learn to say no instead of giving in to everyone. The scene emphasizes Marty's frustration with his father's lack of assertiveness. Another cut moment involves Marty convincing young George to practice punching him. George timidly tries, but then refuses to continue. Interestingly, while the movie doesn't explain why George became so meek, the novelization that accompanied the film offers an answer. It suggests George's father constantly discouraged him from taking risks or doing anything for himself. Between the McFly family breakfast and Doc's phone call, there was another removed scene where Marty considers sending a demo tape to a record company. At first, he can't work up the courage and leaves the envelope empty on the table. However, in the final film, we see Marty at breakfast with a sealed envelope, indicating he ultimately decided to send it. Another deleted scene shows Marty after arriving in 1955, asking a passing woman to pinch him, thinking he might be dreaming. She mistakes this for harassment and hits him over the head, which draws a police officer to the scene. One of the funniest deleted moments features Doc and Marty peeking into Lorraine's classroom during a test and catching her cheating off her neighbor's paper. After class, Lorraine tells her friend, "I would have failed anyway." Marty, meanwhile, is shocked by his mother's behavior.
It's terrible. Girls chasing boys. When I was your age, I never chased a boy or called a boy.
The Darth Vader scene was also much longer in its original version. In the extended sequence, Marty gives George detailed instructions while brandishing Doc's hairdryer, accusing George of violating the space-time continuum, and even knocking him out with chloroform before leaving. There was also a cut line from Lorraine, where she says she'll let her future children do whatever they want. This dialogue was reused in the second film, when the second Marty sneaks past the first Marty and Lorraine from 1955. Marty quips,
I'd like to have that in writing. Yeah, me too.
At the end of the movie, the scene where a policeman asks Doc for a permit to conduct his experiment cuts off as Doc reaches into his pocket. In the full version, Doc pulls out a $50 bill to bribe the officer. Another deleted scene explains why George nearly misses Marty's plan at the parking lot. Bullies had locked George in a phone booth, and Principal Strickland simply called him a slacker and walked away. Rumor has it this scene was cut to preserve Strickland's image as a strict but fair disciplinarian. During filming, there were plenty of bloopers when things didn't go as planned, such as a window slamming shut at the wrong moment as Marty tried to sneak out, or actors forgetting their lines. In one instance, the crew played a prank on Michael J. Fox. In a scene where Marty drinks from a bottle while sitting in a car with young Lorraine, the water inside was secretly swapped for an alcoholic drink. Fox, unaware of the switch, completed the scene and took a swig, only to realize something was off. Worldwide recognition. The rough cut of Back to the Future was ready just 3 weeks after filming wrapped. At the test screening, the final few minutes were even shown in black and white due to time constraints, but that didn't affect audience reactions. They were thrilled. However, viewers were reportedly tense during the scene where Einstein travels through time, as they feared something terrible had happened to the dog. The final 116-minute version was completed on June 23, 1985, and premiered worldwide on July 3rd, just in time for Independence Day. The film became an instant box office hit, receiving widespread critical acclaim for its originality, humor, and captivating plot. With a total budget of $19 million, the movie grossed $381 million globally. Initially, a sequel was not planned, so the theatrical release of Back to the Future ended with the DeLorean flying away and the credits rolling. Later, the phrase "to be continued" was added. Here's an interesting tidbit. In the Spanish dub, Marty introduces himself as Levi Strauss instead of Calvin Klein, while in the French version, he uses Pierre Cardin. Meanwhile, in mainland China, the film was initially banned because the concept of time travel was seen as disrespectful to history. The ban was later lifted. At the Saturn Awards, the film won Best Science Fiction Film, Best Special Effects, and Best Actor for Michael J. Fox. It was also nominated for numerous other major awards, including the Academy Awards. While it didn't win in 3 of its Oscar categories, it did take home the award for Best Sound Editing. More importantly, Back to the Future became a cultural classic and was added to the National Film Registry in 2007. A year earlier, the Writers Guild of America ranked its script 56th on their list of the greatest screenplays of all time. Today, the work of Zemeckis and Gale is studied as a model of the perfect screenplay in film schools around the world. Following the movie's release, kits were created to modify DeLoreans to look like the time machine. Even the Cars creator, John DeLorean, sent a thank you letter to Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis for immortalizing his creation. The film also impressed then-President Ronald Reagan. The line about Reagan as president was pre-approved, but during a screening, Reagan reportedly asked the theater staff to rewind and replay the scene.
Wow. Let's do that again. No.
A year later, he quoted the movie in one of his speeches. "Where we're going, we don't need roads."
Doc, we better back up. We don't have enough road to get up to 88.
Roads? Well, we're going, we don't need roads.
Back to the Future is referenced widely in pop culture, such as in the animated series Rick and Morty, whose characters resemble Doc and Marty. The film had a profound impact on the careers of its stars. Michael J. Fox is still recognized as Marty McFly. One remarkable encounter happened in the jungles of Bhutan, where a passing monk called out, "Marty McFly." Unfortunately, Fox's career was later hampered by Parkinson's disease, and he now focuses on his foundation for Parkinson's research. Leah Thompson, despite her memorable role in the film, chose to prioritize her family over her career. She returned to acting in the early 2000s and now appears in TV projects. Christopher Lloyd, already a well-known actor, continues to appear in small roles. Crispin Glover, however, had a falling out with the producers over the Back to the Future sequels and was replaced by another actor. Claudia Wells, who played Jennifer, also left the series, citing her mother's battle with cancer. While Glover continued acting in films and TV, Wells's career stalled afterward. The second and third parts of Back to the Future, released in 1989 and 1990, were also hits. All rights to the story remain with Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale. In interviews, Zemeckis has firmly stated that no reboots or remakes will be approved during his or Gale's lifetimes. Christopher Lloyd, meanwhile, has expressed a wish for another sequel, imagining Marty and Doc Brown traveling to ancient Rome. And that's how Asterix and Obelix were born. What time period would you send these iconic characters to?